This is the latest Dale Earnhardt version of the Losi NASCAR, and today we're going to find out what's new, what it can do, and then we're going to upgrade the crap out of it, put a big stinky power system in it, and see if we can make this thing do over 100 miles an hour. First of all, if you're a Dale Earnhardt fan, you're going to love this new livery because it is Earnhardt through and through, and I think it looks really, really good. And while the Intimidator never got to drive this particular Chevy, I think he would have approved of how it looks. And of course, if you're a fan of standard body clips, you'll love how these bodies attach. 2 clips in the front and 2 clips in the back, and this body comes right off. These body clips are somewhat scale, though the full-size NASCAR uses 4 of them in the front and none of them in the rear. This body has no internal reinforcement and is made of fairly lightweight Lexan. It does have a spoiler on the rear, though we may end up having to trim that down when we start reaching those really high speeds. Overall, I'm hoping the scale shape of this gives us a nice aerodynamic profile, but we're only going to know that once we really start putting it through some wind. Overall, though, this livery is from my youth, and I think it looks absolutely awesome. Underneath that, we do have the standard Losi NASCAR chassis, though I'm curious to see if there have been any subtle updates since it first came out. One thing I noticed is that this brushed motor says Nichibo on it. While this motor looks kind of similar to the brushed motors we get in the other Grom-based cars, this Nichibo is actually made in Taiwan, has a different design in the rear, and could actually be a better motor. We're going to find out just how good it is, though, because before we go brushless, I've got this big 4S brushed ESC, and I want to see if we can make the fastest brushed Losi NASCAR before we let the smoke out. Powering that motor is a 2-in-1 ESC that, again, looks similar to what we see in the Grom, but isn't exactly the same. It does have an external switch here, and while it has a fairly open design, it does claim to be water resistant, so I'm guessing that the board itself is conformally coated. We'll take a closer look at that in a minute. Upgrades are going to be made a little bit easier by the fact that the servo mount isn't integrated into the ESC, though I do plan to upgrade the servo too. While researching this video, I saw that a few people have done high-speed runs with these cars before, but there isn't a ton of information out there on it, and one thing I'm curious to see is if these stock tires can handle really high speed or if they're going to rip apart. These tires are fairly firm, get decent traction, and are foam filled, but they're not belted, so ballooning could be an issue. Because of that, I went ahead and picked up these Proline foam tires. While these aren't specifically designed for speed runs, foam tires are used for speed running quite a bit, and these might actually end up being better, or they might just blow apart. I really don't know. Ever since doing nearly 120 miles an hour with that RTR Limitless, I've really been bitten by the speed bug, and this is going to be my first time doing a dedicated attempt at really high speed with an RC car that's kind of designed for it. We've overpowered a lot of RC cars on this channel, but I think this one's going to be special. One thing that really does give me hope as to the viability of going really fast with this car is the underside and the chassis. To go along with this integrated foam bumper, we've got a really nice, well-defined splitter here. That splitter, along with the body, is going to divert air above and below the chassis very cleanly, and that's good for making it nice and slippery. The whole bottom of the chassis is fairly smooth, though we do have some big holes here on the sides that could cause turbulence. But out back, we do have a diffuser, and while this doesn't do much at stock slow speeds, it's going to help us a lot as we go faster. As air goes underneath a vehicle, it gets squeezed and accelerated, and as that accelerated air exits the back of the vehicle, it needs to be controlled, otherwise it turns into some serious turbulence, which can really slow things down. A diffuser like this is designed to allow the air to exit the back of the vehicle in a controlled manner, so that turbulence is reduced, though the flat rear end of this is definitely going to cause some turbulence. Of course, in order to go fast, we're going to need a lot of power and a lot of control. Let's see how much of that the stock hardware is going to provide us. Of course, being Grom-based, this is one of the easiest minis to work on. About 75% of the screws look exactly like this, and almost all of them use a 2mm hex bit. This makes these cars a lot more straightforward than most minis, which use a 1.5mm bit on a lot of screws. With that cover off, we can get a closer look at the Taiwanese Nichibo motor. This does appear to be pretty high quality. It comes stock with a 19-tooth pinion in this particular instance. The Losi NASCARs use a 3-position motor mount, which is compatible with the mount on most Groms, but not compatible with the thinner, taller mount on the Quake and Gorgon Grom. Just like on all the Groms, this does not have a slipper clutch or a center differential. It uses a direct drive, 4-wheel drive system. We've got a 59-tooth spur here, and I believe this is the longest center shaft anywhere in the Grom line. This direct drive should be great for speed running. In front of the motor, we've got a cooling fan that interestingly is only attached by 1 screw. When we run the much larger brushless motor, we're going to be taking this out, but this car does have the most room for activities in this area, which means hopefully we're not going to be doing a bunch of trimming in order to get that big motor in there. Out of the box, powering all that's going to be the same 2S 1400 mAh hard case LiPo battery we get with all the Groms. For stock running, this thing's fine, but we're going to need a lot more power than this, and fortunately, we won't have to modify the battery tray. While it's only limited to about 34mm in width, this battery strap is very accommodating to taller batteries, and there's also plenty of room under the body, which is good because we might end up having to go all the way to 6S later on. One thing I suspect won't support big 6S power are these plastic outdrives. These are similar to the brushed Grom outdrives, and they do have a tendency to break. Though there is one big difference between this and the Grom, and that's the fact that these use 8mm hexes. All the Groms use 12mm hexes, and this size really does limit what you can put on here. I suspect they did this to keep the scale look of these wheels. If there were 12mm hexes in here, this center hub area would have had to have been a lot larger, and it wouldn't have looked as realistic, though I think some people might have been okay with that trade-off. We do have steel dog bones in the rear, so the Losi upgrade kit isn't going to include those, but we definitely will be upgrading this for big power in a little bit. This rear diffuser attaches basically the same way as the rear ends attached to all the Groms, and the pins are held in with them. These little plastic threaded body shocks are unique to the Losi NASCAR. The springs on them are reasonably stiff, though we did get a full tuning kit in case we need to adjust it when we're going fast. One thing to note is that this still uses the old style upper shock mount. The new Quake and Gorgon Groms use an integrated style where the screw is part of the ball. I suspect this is stronger and probably something we're going to see on any future releases. But for what we're going to be doing with this car, this should be just fine. And fortunately, all of these ball ends are steel, which means they'll last a lot longer than if they were plastic. However, speaking of plastic, the included differentials adopt the same original plastic design as the original brushed Groms. This is as opposed to the all-steel differentials we get in the brushed Quake and Gorgon. These plastic output cups are a fairly significant weak point and something we're almost certainly going to want to upgrade when we go big power. As you can see, we do have all sealed bearings here. And then inside, we do get the updated metal spider gears, but the side gears are still plastic. And again, I don't think this is going to handle 6S power, so we've got upgrades for this as well. The steering is the same as on pretty much all Groms, including the same steering servo that does have brass gears. We may or may not be upgrading this, we'll see how it goes. But now I want to go fast, so let's get some tires on this thing and see what it can do stock. Okay, fully charged 2S battery, stock system, let's see what we can do. Now obviously this road's probably going to be too rough and too short for when we really start getting some speed up, but I think for this stock system, it'll probably be sufficient. And there it goes. That's full throttle, and it is not super fast. Let's give her another pass. Very stable, but not very fast. Give her one more to get the best chance possible of a good top speed. There we go. She definitely looks good. All right, let's see what we got. Bringing her in. And 19 miles an hour, that is exactly what I expected it to be. In stock form, this car is going to be pretty fun. It's best for very smooth surfaces, but you can do some nice sliding around, some drifting. The four-wheel drive makes it very controllable. And yeah, this is definitely fun with the stock power system in it, especially if all you want to do is kind of bash around and make things look scale and make things look good. This thing definitely looks scale, and it definitely looks good, but that's not what we're here for, so let's add some more power. That was a great baseline and pretty much exactly in line with what I expected from this car out of the box. But now we're going to spice things up a bit by replacing the stock 25 amp 2S ESC with a 90 amp 4S ESC. I fully expect this to kill the stock brushed motor, but maybe we'll set a brushed Losi NASCAR world record before it happens. By the way, let me know down in the comments if you know what the fastest brushed Losi NASCAR is right now. That way we'll know if we beat it. I have had a lot of people ask me what I use for my GPS. I use one of these GNSS GPSs. It works with an app on my phone. As you can see, this one's taking quite a beating, but it still works great. Unfortunately, because this is a 2-in-1 ESC, we are going to be forced to also replace our receiver. I'm not too upset about that because later on, I'm definitely going to want a gyro, and this receiver doesn't have a gyro built into it. So we're also going to be upgrading to this FlySky FSR7V. This is an ANT protocol receiver, and it works with this FlySky FSG11P, which is my daily driver personal transmitter right now. This beast of an ESC should fit exactly where the old one was, and I'm just going to use the adhesive that was already there because this is temporary. And then I'm going to mount the receiver right here behind my GPS. Again, the really nice thing about this car is there's plenty of room for upgrades. A lot of the Groms are pretty limited in where you can put stuff. As far as I know, this R7V is the only ANT protocol receiver that actually has a gyro. I do wish they had smaller ones, but these are pretty cheap and they've got a ton of really cool functionality, so it's not that big of a deal. Fortunately, these connectors are exactly the same, so we can just wire this motor right up. And while I wire this up, let's talk predictions about the speed we're gonna get. The biggest thing you're fighting when going faster is wind resistance. And while in theory it might seem like twice as much power is gonna give you twice as much speed, that's probably not what we're gonna have in practice. And this is because wind resistance isn't linear. It actually increases with the square of your speed. So as far as wind resistance is concerned, to go twice as fast, you need 4 times as much power. That's why the faster you go, the harder it gets. How fast is this 90 amp 4S system gonna go before we blow up this motor? Let's go find out. Now we are gonna be overvolting, overcurrenting, and over RPMing this motor, so I expect it to blow up during these runs, but let's see how fast we can go before that happens. It's definitely faster than it was. Oh, careful, careful. Don't want to wreck it before we go too fast. Full throttle. That is quite a bit quicker. Are we gonna get twice as fast? I'm not sure. Let's get one more pass out of it. Man, that thing is stable and a lot faster than it was. Oh, wrecked it. However, we did get a nice, smooth, stable 42 miles an hour out of this before I flipped it. For those keeping track, that's actually twice as fast as it is stock. And unless you put a comment down there telling me otherwise, I'm gonna guess that's probably the fastest brushed Losi NASCAR in the world. And surprisingly, I think this little motor could take even more. Maybe we'll mess around with that later on. But now, it's time to get serious. And in order to get serious, we're gonna need to go brushless. This is the Castle Mamba Micro X2 ESC. And to go along with it, we're gonna use this 1007 motor. This probably isn't the most powerful combo we're gonna end up using in this video, but it is a reasonable combo we can put in this car, and I think it's probably the most power this stock drivetrain is gonna be able to handle. And I'm curious to see how fast we can go before we really start upgrading things. And now pulling this back apart, you'll see the nice thing about the 1007 motor is that it's fairly similar in size to the stock motor, so it should fit most of the same places, though the output shaft is larger. Fortunately, these Mod 0.5 gears are a lot easier to find on Amazon than they used to be, so that's not really much of a problem anymore. Even though we want to go faster, I'm actually probably going to be using a 3S battery instead of a 4S battery on this particular system, and that's because these motors have a maximum RPM rating, and the 4S system would greatly exceed that maximum RPM. That maximum RPM is actually a physical limitation of the motor itself. Let me show you why. Inside this motor is a rotor, and that rotor spins really fast to move whatever you're powering. And when that thing spins, it becomes subjected to something called centrifugal force. That force is because something that's going in a straight line wants to keep going in a straight line. And when something is spinning, it's basically constantly trying to be turned. So essentially, as this motor is running, the magnets in the middle continually try to fly off the rotor. And it's this Kevlar wrapping that keeps it in place. However, the faster it spins, the more they want to fly off because they want to keep going straight. And at some point, that force is going to overcome this Kevlar and the motor's just gonna blow up. On 4S, we would be exceeding that maximum RPM by quite a bit, and while that's probably something we're gonna end up doing in this video in the long run, I don't wanna blow up this motor just yet. By my calculations, 3S should still give us a nice boost over that 42 mile an hour brushed record, and like I said, I'm curious to see what this stock drivetrain can handle before we have to start upgrading things. I'm also curious to see how this Amazon pinion gear is gonna hold up because it does not have a lot of tooth profile on it, and I'm a little bit worried it's gonna end up stripping out against this spur gear, but I guess we're gonna have to find out. As you can see, it does nicely nestle in behind this fan, so we don't have to remove this just yet. One annoying thing about this platform is you can't check the final mesh once everything gets tightened down, but at the very least, it feels okay. And now all we need to do is set this Mamba Micro X2 down in here where the stock ESC was. It fits perfectly. Let me finish getting this wired up, and let's go see what this reasonable brushless system can do with a 3S SMC battery. All right, we're gonna try this bumpy road one more time. I'm not gonna go right to left so I don't hit that patch in the road and end up flipping it again. It is pretty breezy out here, so let's see if we can keep it under control. Here we go. Full throttle. Okay, that was pretty good. I think we can do better though. Let's bring it back and try one more time. It's actually staying under control pretty well. I do have the gyro on, and the gyro is definitely helping me out. This thing is still pretty darn smooth, impressively smooth actually. All right, here we go, one more time. Full throttle. Oh, lost it. Okay, that's back on its wheels. Let's see if we hurt anything. Seems pretty good. Let's see what we got. All right, guys, 54 miles an hour. That's almost 3 times the stock speed, but now it's time to get serious. We're gonna be installing a bunch of performance upgrades, but one thing we're not gonna be changing is this body. I think in order to call it the world's fastest Losi NASCAR, it needs to keep the NASCAR body. I did notice there are some cars that have gone over 100 miles an hour, but they used streamliner bodies. The fastest speed I've seen with the stock body has been 87 miles an hour, and at least I wanna try to beat that. I've done some calculations on the theory of that speed, and I'm not sure these tires are gonna be up to it. At 100 miles an hour, these are going to be spinning at about 15,000 RPM, and I don't know if they're going to hold together or not. We are going to try it, but if they don't, I've got these Proline foam tires that might do better or might do worse. I really don't know. We're also done running on that rough street, and even though where we are going to be running has its own obstacles, I think it'll be a lot more appropriate for going fast. I've got enough room out there for about 50 to 55 miles an hour, but as you saw, things start getting pretty hairy above that, and we've already crashed this thing multiple times. By the way, if you're having fun with this video, make sure you give me some hype points. They're underneath that thumbs up button on mobile, and hyping the video will definitely help get it pushed out to some new people. We've got a ton of new performance bits to put on this to hopefully make it do better at high speed, but what I don't want to do is beat up this limited edition body anymore, so I went ahead and picked up a brand new unpainted body from Losi. This is the same shape, but I feel a lot more comfortable tearing this one up than the really nice Dale Earnhardt one. I'm going to quickly paint this a high visibility color. Before I do, I'm going to use this magic eraser and just scratch up the inside of the body to give it some tooth for the paint to stick to. Then I'm going to quickly clean it with some 90 plus IPA on a new clean paper towel. I'd recommend not using a rag for this because rags typically have detergent detergent waxes in them, and the IPA can melt that wax and deposit it on the thing you're trying to paint, which is pretty counterproductive. And now I'm gonna go hit it with some nice shiny red Tamiya polycarbonate paint. While that's drying, it's time to make this thing truly powerful, and the star of that show is gonna be this Castle Cobra 10 ESC and much larger 1010 brushless motor, but we've got a lot of supporting characters we need to install in order to handle that power. Starting in the rear, we're going to take the stock plastic geared and plastic output differential out and change it out for these ARA 31193 differentials. Of course, these are from ARMA. These are oil filled and have steel outputs instead of the plastic outputs. And while we're at it, we're going to swap these stock plastic out drives for a kit from Losi as well. This is very similar to the kit you get from ARMA on the Groms, but because the hexes are a different size, they're completely different than what you would get on a Grom. And of course, the way these axles are designed means you can't just use the stock hexes on the upgraded axles from the ARMA, as they don't attach the same way as on the upgraded axles. Now we just pop these out of here, pop in the new steel stub axle, install the tiny little cross pin, add the aluminum hex, and then install the teeny tiny locking screw. By the way, this takes a 50,000th bit, so if you don't already have one of those, you might want to pick one up. Be careful, don't over tighten it, but yeah, that looks really awesome. Now I just need to do the other side, and then install the differential using the same dog bones that came stock because they're already steel. And then we're going to top off the back end with these really nice all aluminum TLR emulsion style shocks. Are these really necessary? Probably not, but they sure do look nice. Just like that, and these do look nice and they feel really good as well. They do come pre-filled with fluid too, so you don't have to mess with that. I also got these adjustable arms and a spring kit, but so far this feels fine, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure how I would tune it to make it better. If while I'm driving this fast, you see a deficiency in how these are set up that these could have helped, let me know down in the comments. By the way, speaking of over-revving, this motor was over the limit, but the 1010 motor we're going to put in is going to be way worse. It's not designed for success, so we might have some pretty catastrophic failures on our hands. We'll find out. Before we get to installing that, though, I need to do the exact same thing to the front we did on the rear, just like that. Now, while I was putting that together, I noticed I've got a couple of extra bearings from that differential kit, and while you guys probably already noticed it, I didn't, but let's check. And yep, I put that rear differential in with no bearings on it. Let me just fix that real quick, and let's get to the heart of the upgrade, the electronics. Along with the power system, I also want to upgrade the steering for more precision and control. We're going to do that using this sweet Losi steering rack and this Injora servo. In a previous video, I said this servo had died. Turns out the nut just came off the included servo saver. I went ahead and picked up another one, and we'll make sure we thread lock this one on. Unlike on the Groms, the servo mount isn't also the ESC, so we don't need an upgraded one. Though I think I might use this aluminum one anyway, because I'm hoping I can mount the big ESC on top of it. In order to do that, first we need to get rid of this little guy. If you do want a reasonable, crazy power system in any of these Grom-based vehicles, this is a great ESC to go with, though. And then with the servo saver rebuilt, tightened down, and thread locked this time, we can go ahead and get it installed. Though now that I'm looking at it with this 1010 motor and the Cobra 10, I think I can actually get it down in the chassis if I don't use this mount, so let's switch back over to the stock plastic one. This won't be quite as stable as the aluminum mount, but if I can keep the center of gravity lower, I think that's more important. But unfortunately, it looks like it just barely isn't going to fit, so back to the aluminum mount. Whenever you're doing something new, these kinds of mistakes and experimentation are just part of the game. However, if you like seeing me redo things so you don't have to, now's a great time to subscribe because we redo things on this channel all the time. Like the famous old saying goes, we do it right because we do it twice. And now we just need to swap out this steering rack. This stock plastic one would probably be fine, but ever since I had that bad experience with the Amazon special one, I wanted to check out something a little bit higher quality. But to be honest, now that I put this together, this also has quite a bit of play in it, and more than the stock plastic rack does, so I think we're gonna stick with plastic again on this car. Of course, it's probable that over time this plastic would wear more quickly than the aluminum and get sloppy. But for the remainder of our speedruns and to get maximum precision, I think this is the best way to go. But now for the real star of the show, it's time to swap this 1007 motor out for this much beefier 1010 motor. This thing's 5600 kV and has an 80,000 RPM max rotational speed. I did the math on that, and while the voltage we're going to be running will be able to get this car up to a theoretical 107 miles an hour, at that speed, this motor will also be turning a pretty sporty 140,000 RPM, and I have my suspicions it's not going to be able to handle it. The good news is, at this power and speed, there are plenty of other failure points, so maybe the motor won't be the first thing to blow up. I guess we're just going to have to find out. Installing this motor, I also just realized there's a ton of play between the spur and pinion, and this is one of the downsides to having these fixed locations. Sometimes aftermarket gears just don't work well with them. Fortunately, we do have a slotted motor mount, though it is pretty frustrating to use these in a Grom, because you can't really tell what your final mesh is until you actually get the motor installed, but I don't think we have a choice here. All right, after much finagling and sweet talking, I think I got it where I want it. You do have to take into account that when the cover goes on, it's going to tighten up just a little bit more, but this feels pretty good. Of course, there's only one way to know for sure, so cross your fingers for me. And now we really find out how I did. If I get this right on the first try, I think that deserves a like. Oh, that does feel pretty smooth. Maybe a little snug, but I think we're gonna leave it. The last major component is this big 6S ESC, and unfortunately my receiver's in the way. Figure out where to put that later. But with that move, the ESC should fit right here. Unfortunately, we do have a bit of a clearance issue with these Nerf bars. I don't think these will have any effect on speedrunning. They're really just to keep the body from crushing in when bashing. And honestly, not having this lattice shape in the wind might actually make it a little bit smoother underneath. And of course, with that off, this does fit just fine. Now I just need to finish up the wiring, and this bad unit is ready to rock and roll. I think it definitely looks overpowered now. Speaking of power, we're gonna be pushing this thing down the road with a 1300 milliamp hour 100C 6S drone battery. And given that it's made for drones, I think it's gonna work pretty well here. I will say though, with all that in there, this thing's getting very heavy. I'm not convinced these tires are gonna be able to take the weight and the speed, and we're gonna have these foam tires with us as a backup. Unfortunately, these things don't look like they're glued very well, so I'm gonna go ahead and re-glue them. Hopefully just a dab of water-thin CA around the edges will give these the best chance possible of not blowing apart at 100 miles an hour. I hate gluing tires, so I'm gonna go ahead and get these finished up, get this battery charged up, and let's go see what we've made. Guys, here we go. We got the red body on here. I think I've got everything trimmed up. We've got the GPS set, and let's see what we can do. I'm gonna try to make a fairly slow pass to begin with. This thing feels very, very twitchy, and I get the feeling I'm not gonna be able to control it. But let's see what we've got. All right, here we go. Nope, that didn't work out very well. All right, let's try it again. Go a little slower this time. Oh, yeah, she's got some aerodynamic problems. Okay, that was 65 miles an hour. Let's see if we can get to go a little bit faster. It's starting to get beat up now, unfortunately. I'm not sure how much faster we're gonna be able to go. It has plenty of power, but it's kind of hard to control. All right, I've tried it a few more times. I can't seem to get over about 70 miles an hour, so let's try with the foam tires and see if they get better traction. Okay, I have no idea if these are actually gonna be better or not. I know a lot of speedrunners use foam tires, so let's give it a try. I think we're really running into an aerodynamic problem here though, because it seems like it wants to take off around 70 miles an hour, but maybe these tires will help me get better control. All right, here we go. Oh, something burned out. I think we just hit bust. Okay, I'm not sure what that was. It seems like it's okay still, so we might go for another run. We did hit 74 miles an hour, which is pretty good. These foam tires do feel a lot better. Let's try it again. I don't think this is gonna work. I do think something's broken, but let's try it and see what happens. Oh, okay. Oh, that was a bad crash. All right, back on the bench, and I have to say my two main lessons on this are this thing is an absolute tank and speedrunning is hard. As you can see from this screenshot, I actually did manage 78 miles an hour, but unfortunately the camera wasn't rolling, so we're not gonna count that. But with all this extra weight and all those crashes, the only thing I broke was one body post. Everything else looks really good. The biggest problem I had was that the steering kept getting worse and worse. I'm not sure if there's a problem with this servo or what, but towards the end I had to keep adjusting the steering all the way to the right or all the way to the left just to keep it going straight. And honestly, the steering felt like my biggest problem the whole time. I'm not sure if it was because I didn't have enough downforce, but it felt really darty. Though maybe a bit more toe-in would help. There is a bit of slop on both sides here, but it doesn't seem excessive. I think this motor and ESC combo has more than enough power to go very much faster than I went, as most of the time I was barely getting above half throttle. And I'm really impressed that the drivetrain held up, even though we did upgrade a bunch of stuff on here. Not that much of it was necessary, and you could go pretty fast with most of the stock components. I do think these Proline foam tires are the way to go for speedrunning. They seem to have a lot more traction than the stock tires, and their lack of ballooning helped a lot too. And I'm really glad I used this dedicated speedrun body because it got torn up pretty good. And now we can put the stock body back on here and pretend like nothing bad ever happened. So that's it, guys. I think this Dale Earnhardt body looks really, really awesome, and I had a lot of fun powering up this car and trying to go as fast as possible, even though we ended up busting and not going 100. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. Make sure you get subscribed if you want to see more cool videos, and then check out one of these cool videos.